Hello and welcome to Radical Democracy. I'm Maddi Cheers, and I am very pleased to have Maggie Graham on the show today. Her topic, motherhood, living on the edge. I asked Maggie to be on the show today because she represents the views and the practices of several groups of people that are often maligned by the press. And as you all know, those of you that are regular listeners, my biggest concern about what's going on in media today is that often we are pitted against each other. It seems like every mainstream media station that you look at is taking one position or the other. And if you're on one side or the other, it seems like it's okay to talk badly about people. And for those of you that know the Women's Oneness Project, at the Women's Oneness Project, the whole idea is that we sit down and we talk to each other. We don't have to agree with each other, but we do have to respect each other. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere. And the idea of radical democracy based on the great law of peace and the teaching of you cannot have a just, fair peace on earth without allowing everyone's voice to be heard. So all this judgmental, dictatorial stuff that's coming out, and I do think it's dictatorial, coming out in part from our government, definitely in part from the mainstream press. I think that the way to fight that is to be the people that don't allow that. We're not part of that. We are above that, actually, that we're not going to enter into the fray. We are going to talk. We're going to listen to each other. And Maggie I'm just thrilled that she took time out of her daughter's birthday to be here on the show with us. Maggie is the mother of 11 children, God bless you, a devout Christian, and a small business entrepreneur. So I am so pleased to welcome to the show Maggie Graham of Maggie Graham Solutions. Thanks for being on, Maggie.
Thank you for having me. It's so awesome to be here today.
Well, it's awesome to have you. So, of course, I'm going to ask you the number one question on my mind and everybody else's mind. Why 11 kids?
Why 11 kids? Yes, you're right. A lot of people ask that. They have different ways of asking that. And over the years, as our little brood has kind of grown, people have asked kind of, why not birth control, or why all sorts of questions, right? There's different ways of asking that question. And so, my main answer is I never chose a number. We didn't try to have 11 children. I'll put it that way. We didn't have an attitude of getting married. When my husband and I got married, we were, I think in our, I was 19 and he was 23. And when we got married, we just had a thought that we would probably have maybe 3 kids, and he wanted 3 before he was 30 as our ideas kind of were forming. And I was like, okay, in my heart, I was like, I'll have however many I can have till I can have 2 of each. It's kind of the way I thought at first. And within the first year or so, or 2 years of our marriage, we were, this is going to end up being talking about birth control, and I had no idea we were going to talk about that. But okay, I'll go there. He and I kind of got convicted after 2 years of marriage that I was on the pill, and I decided, I had read some books about, scientifically what's going on in my body and physiologically, and I got pretty convicted that basically there were possibilities that I could be aborting babies accidentally through some of the chemicals I was putting in my body. And I got really convicted about that, and I thought, you know what, I didn't know that was one of the pills I was taking said that it's an abortifacient. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. So he and I had a conversation, and one day, it was a really hard weekend. It was actually over my birthday. I think when I turned 20, 21 or something, and I looked at him and I said, I just don't feel right about this anymore, using a chemical to alter my body. And as a believer, I am a Christian, and I've committed my life to the Lord, and my goal in life is to honor him with everything I say and do with my body and my life, period. And I really felt convicted that I couldn't go on doing that and using that altering, like, God, you can have my life, but don't take my womb attitude. So so he and I talked about it, and we made the decision. He took my pills and threw them in the trash, and it was a marital choice to decide not to use birth control at that point. And we really never looked back. And so it has been, I never assumed I'd have a lot of children. I just didn't know what the Lord would give us. And I've actually been pregnant 20 times. I've lost 9 babies already through miscarriage.
Wow.
In addition to the 11 the Lord's blessed us with. So I don't take for granted a single child. I don't assume that because God blessed me once that he will allow me to have more. I treat every baby and every pregnancy as if it's my last. I always have. And I'm grateful for every blessing, joy that he gives me through children and through just the honor and blessing it is to be a mom in this world and to raise up people to love God and to honor him and to be just amazing people who can make this world a better place.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. Yay, yay, you. And I really, one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on, like you and I talked about earlier, is that there seems to be, especially with the whole climate change movement, there seems to be this attitude about people should not have any more children. And I believe that is exactly the wrong approach.
I can't agree with you more. I can't agree with you more because honestly, the whole idea of, I can't even go there, but the carbon footprint and having more children and how we're destroying the earth. I have to tell you, let me just be really candid with you. I went to my electric and utilities company. Our city, and where I live, actually has a single company that controls the water, the electricity, and the trash, of our community. Right. And I went there to just make sure that how my bill and compare my bill to families of other sizes, not because I was comparing family. I was just trying to get my bill lower, first of all. And in talking with them, when they found out, because obviously you don't go post on the internet or everywhere, come examine my, utility bill and how much it costs us. But I went to ask them how, if I could get my bill lower. They looked at my bill and they said, Maggie, you use less water, less electricity per person than the average household in our community.
Wow.
And I said, thank you for letting me know that. She thought we would have no idea. No one, based on your bills, no one would ever know that you had that many children or that many people in your household. And so it is not something that is a real issue in that way. If anything, every contributor to our household, is contributing to this earth, is contributing to the community at large, people who will be growing and having jobs and contributing to the atmosphere and the lifestyle of others and loving people and making this world a better place. So more people to take care of it and be good stewards of what God gives us in our community and on earth.
Exactly. And that's you just never, I don't have any children myself, but I do have grandnieces and grandnephews and I do have nieces and nephews. And you just, it's so hopeless to say don't have children to me because you don't know who's coming in. You don't know who's going to be here. They could be the kid that comes up with the solution to the problem.
Absolutely.
When they talk about
Absolutely.
In the Great Law of Peace, when it talks about the peacemaker, what if the next child born is the great peacemaker? What if the next child born is the second coming? What if the next child born is the next Buddha? However you want to look at it. What if the next child born is the next Einstein that can figure out how to solve all these problems that we're having with pollution? You don't know. You don't know. We have no way of knowing that, but we have to allow for that. And what we shouldn't be doing, what I find really horrific, is things like what's going on in China, where they're forced sterilization of the Uyghur. I'm going to say that name wrong. Uyghur Muslims. This, we're not going to have more than 2 kids. Stuff. Nobody should be able to tell you what you can do with your body, with your mind, and with your heart. And I think that's where I get terribly concerned about some of the things that I listen to in government, because there seem to be a lot of people that are pretty committed to having a big enough government to tell you what you can do every single step of the way, including how many children you can have. And that's just not your realm. That's not our human realm. That's not where we should be concerned.
Yeah, and you never know. Like, I appreciate what you said. It's very true. When people go like, oh, you should only have a certain number of kids, and I look at my amazing lineup of children, and I just go, yeah, which one? Which one would you give back? Which one isn't, valid or valuable in this world, regardless of, everything about them? That there are so many blessings that come with children. And God, nowhere in Scripture, God only talks about children being a blessing and a gift. And why would I say no thank you to gifts and all the balance of that? Because when we say yes to the Lord for children, we say yes to Him through other ways that He chooses to provide for those children and bless us. And so it's not an either or. There were many years that people tried to, I got a lot of ridicule, and it wasn't just from like a non-believing community. I mean, a lot of ridicule for having lots of children and saying yes to the Lord in that area. And it was kind of like, it's as though people have permission to kind of open up your finances and ask all the questions, right? And it's very interesting where that can go. But no, I agree with you. I don't believe that that anyone should say, oh, not that one. And the thing that convicted us as well, the subtitle of one of the books that I read before we made the decision to just open ourselves to however many the Lord would bless us with, was basically, guess who's not coming to dinner? And it was a dissertation on how many children, how many amazing people in this world would never be born if they had capped how many children could be born at 4.
Right.
Those
right.
number 5 accidents, right? And
right.
you have, I mean, an amazing list. You wouldn't have Beethoven. You wouldn't have just so many amazing people.
Yes, so. and that's, what when I think about my dad and I were just talking about this about a month ago. When you think about the total 11.5 million people that were killed during the Holocaust, think of that. Think of all those people that never got to contribute to making the world better. What if the person that could have saved the environment was among them? And this is where this attitude that a huge group of people known as the government are going to be better for us than a small group of people with character. This is the thing that bothers me. And, we talk about this all the time on this show with the Great Law of Peace, is that the Haudenosaunee had rules about who could be a leader. You had to have certain character qualities: peaceful, kind, respectful, responsible, love your family. We have no such rules. We have no such rules. Follow your spiritual path. You have to know your ceremonies. We just pick the people who can raise the most money and shout the loudest. And I've said this I think I've said this on the show, but if I was going to run for office, I contacted several groups, but one of them being the Democrats, and told them I was not going to run a campaign of smearing somebody. I was not going to damage somebody's soul. That doesn't fit into my belief system. I'm not going to run a campaign based on damaging somebody's soul. I will run a campaign based on what I think will improve the country and the world at large, but no trashing. And they had no interest in me. And part of that, you and I talked about that when we talked before the show, that I think you said a really brilliant thing, that morality is not malleable. Ethics are. Ethics are a choice. Ethics are malleable. So morality, though, when it comes from a spiritual place, which it normally comes from, is not so malleable. It's not like you could sit around and go, well, all right, that guy, I'm against, the abuse of women, as long as the people I get to protest against doing this are in my party. They're my political party. My ethics say that I have to stand up against a person that isn't in my political party. But if somebody in my political party has decided to abuse women, I'm not going to talk about that so much, because my ethics say that my political party is better than your political party. Whereas when you're looking at morals, even Bruce Lipton, who wrote the book, The Biology of Belief, he talks about how we traded when he talks about the move where we are now, what he calls scientific materialism, when he talks about the move from the world being run by religions to the world being run by science, he said all we did was trade the priests in the black coats for the priests in the white coats, but at least the priests in the black coats were teaching some sort of moral value. So I'm not really sure. I don't believe. I'm sure there are people out there who believe this, but I'm not sure ethics can replace morality.
No, and I know, you did talk about that. You mentioned that you had someone on a couple weeks ago, I think, about, that was talking about the attack on, on Christians or beliefs, something about that, and and kind of wondering why that is. And we did talk about just the difference between morality and values and ethics, actually morality and ethics, and how one is external and the other is internal. Mm-hmm. And so, ethics are things that, like you said, we do, whereas morality comes from, your value system, what you believe. What you believe is what's going to translate to your actions.
Right.
And so if you do not value life, you're going to have no problem with murder or killing or having things like that. If you don't value another person or their point of view, you're not going to treat them well. That's
Exactly.
just a fact. It's the actions that are going to follow the heart belief. And honestly, the absence of God in society and in our world today, and the lack of honoring who he is and that they have a creator who has a moral, who's given us his will and a desire for our lives, if we want to live as if that doesn't exist, well, basically, without morals, murder's not wrong. Without a God, there's no such, murder's not wrong because,
Right.
and I'm going to murder just because it's the most extreme, right? But because who said it's wrong? We get to question whether or not that's wrong or not.
Yeah.
Where instead there's a foundation of truth that needs to be given and made in society in order to have order. It's just a fact.
Well,
And that's why we have
it's
chaos
much
today.
more of a fact than people would care to admit. So I spent some time doing some research this past week, as I always do before the show. As everybody knows, I read news. I do not watch news, but this had nothing to do with news. I was researching because what you always hear atheists say, and I have nothing against atheists. I have friends who are atheists, dear friends who are atheists. Right. But what atheists
Absolutely.
always say, the argument they always make about why religion is bad is that all this war has happened in the name of God, that some of the worst things that have happened on the planet have happened in the name of God or in the name of religion. And I'm always quick to point out that somebody doing something in the name of God doesn't mean that that is what God meant to happen. Somebody
Amen.
using that as an
Very
excuse to exterminate a bunch of people does not mean that that is what God intended to happen. So I looked up statistically how many people, since the Crusades, how many people have been killed in wars that were fought over religion. And it totals approximately 152 million. So we're talking since the Crusades, that's, a few hundred going on there. In the last 100 years, in wars that have been fought for Marxism, Marxist revolution, just in the wars that have been fought to change a regime in a country to the Marxist way of looking, Marxist revolutions have killed in the last 100 years, have killed at least, the estimates are 160 million people, and these people are atheists, and they have, aside from that, they are continuing. This is not stopped. So when we look at Venezuela, when we look at what Maduro and Chavez did to what was once a beautiful, largely Christian country, what they came in and did and promised what all Marxist leaders promise is that, we're going to give we've got all this oil money, we're going to distribute it equally among the people. But when you give power to people whose only objective is that they think they're more right than you and they want power, they're not coming from even an ethical background, though they'll tell you they are. Oh yeah, I'm going to give everybody. Everybody's going to share all this money equally. We're all going to share it equally, which they did not do, neither of them. They put their friends in charge, disbanded the democratically elected Congress in Venezuela because they disagreed with them. And now Venezuela people are starving. It is a mess. Anybody that does pay attention to that, it is a wreck. Yeah. Maduro has absolutely no intention of giving up power. And I have friends that live in South America, and they talk about all the time what a tragedy it is to see what Venezuela became. So if you look throughout history, all you people who think that you are going to do this big, but we're not going to be the ones that do Marxism this way. We're going to be the ones that bring utopia. No such thing. And you can't do it fast. That's the problem, is that if you have this revolution, this is not going to be fast and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be, everybody's going to share in all the oil money. Look around you. You have the wrong kind of people leading. You are choosing people who have no moral compass. And as long as you're going to choose people, but even all you need to do to know this is not just read about Venezuela, you watch congressional hearings. Watch the way they talk to people that are against their point of view. It's disgusting. I watched the questioning of Mark Zuckerberg, a little bit of it on Facebook. It was horrible the way they questioned him. And it was, what's her name? AOC. She asks him a question that I didn't even understand what she was asking. He looks at her, he goes, what? And she goes, let's just go on to the next question. How is that ethical? You explain to me, miss, up on your high horse, how that is an ethical position. You didn't understand my question, too bad. I don't have to explain it to you. We'll just go on. So, and I'm only using her as an example. This can happen on both sides of the aisle. I am not a person, those of you that listen, you know, one of my big things is stereotyping. I am not a person that stereotypes groups, but I am going to call you out if you're claiming to be the one who's the most ethical, who's going to bring about the big change, and yet you are not acting ethically. So, calling you out on that one.
Definitely. And you mentioned something about just even when we were talking about the differences between the wars with religions and all those things, and how I have kind of a shake-up thought about just that everyone has religion, even if you want to claim an atheism or whatever you want to say, because religion by definition is just the thing you worship.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know anybody, or even anybody who's like religious about watching their football teams, or they're the things they carry their banner? So religion is just what you worship. And so I think that, religion is on attack, but at the same time, it's really not it's not really religion. You have to be specific, about, pinpointing who it is.
Yes, and I have spent all of my adult life studying religion and philosophy and government, and when I look at some of what people are saying, some of this love for Marxism and this love for socialism, they're behaving no differently than anyone has ever had behaved. And as a matter of fact, if you look at China behaves like the Catholic Church did in the Dark Ages. So where do you think we're going with this? You know, and when you sit there and you listen to these people, that they have no problem calling people who disagree with them names, maligning their religion, maligning their choices in family, no problem whatsoever. And at the same time, claiming to be ethical. Newsflash, you're not. You're not.
Right.
You're either consistent.
Again, we talked about the lack of there's a lack of commonality, though, too, about absolutes. There's a lack of absolutes in this world, and a desire to eliminate absolutes,
right?
And relativism. And really, that is one of the roots of our huge issues, as we talked about it at the beginning. I mean, the absence of God or any kind of teaching that there is a creator and someone who has this creator having any influence or interest in this world. The absence of that is going to bring about anarchy. I mean, if we don't have things we can agree on, the foundation.
Yep. And if we're not willing to listen to each other, you and I might not agree on stuff the more we sit down and talk and get to know each other. Totally. I certainly have friends I disagree with. I'm a libertarian, which makes me far more conservative than some of my closest friends. It doesn't mean we're willing to go to war over this stuff. It does mean we're willing to sit there and figure out where we do agree and come up with a law that is fair. So,
yes, we exist in this world together.
Yes.
And if we're going to live together and we want harmony, then there's going to have to be a mutual agree to disagree. And I love you. I think you're amazing. And I think you're a sweet, great person. We don't have to agree. And it's okay to disagree. I mean, I have to teach this to my children, and that's key. That's part of, I think, why when you asked me to be on this show, it just is the whole premise that, teaching my children through homeschooling is what I've chosen to do, and helping them learn how to behave in this world in a loving manner that can value others. We don't have to agree. We're allowed to disagree, and we need to be able to give people freedom, even among siblings, right? Have the freedom to make a mistake, to do something wrong, and not always feel like it's their decision or their place to go and make right every single wrong in this world. Yes, we should all have values and have passion and drive, but there's a way to do it with love, too. There's a way to bring attention to somebody's wrong behavior in kindness and love without, squishing them like a bug. Like it
Right.
just, so it's just a lack of humility in this world as well. And that's something that people have to choose for themselves. You don't I
Right.
don't
You
know.
can't
You have to
legislate
choose to
that.
be humble. You have to choose to be humble, period. It's not something that you're given. You have to choose it.
Yep. I could not agree with you more. And also, one of the characteristics of a Haudenosaunee leader is humility. And I've mentioned on the show before. We talk a lot on the show about education, and we've talked a lot about how the national core curriculum and how public school. And this is nothing against teachers. I'm a big fan of teachers.
No.
And if you know indigenous cultures, the most important people in their cultures are the teachers. I always tell teachers and students that I work with that if American Indians still ran the country, teachers would make $1 million a year, and basketball, football, and baseball players would make zero, because everybody played sports their whole life. Everybody played together. It was part of connecting the community. It was part of staying healthy. But that aside, public school, there are things going on in public school that I think really are borderline child abuse. We know standardized testing doesn't work. We know it destroys
That's right.
a child's self-esteem. We have here in New York kindergarten kids that absolutely so flat out refuse to go to school that the state now has to provide for parents to be able to homeschool them. They are traumatized by school. And why? We have children who are traumatized by going to school, and no one is sitting here saying, maybe we need to change what public school is. So I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about why your choice is homeschooling, and why, by the way, also looked up the statistic on this. So in the last 8 years ago, there were 800,000 families homeschooling their kids. There are now 1,800,000 families homeschooling their kids.
Wow. I didn't even look that up. Good news. That's very interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that our culture, the world today, and especially in America, are seeing the way of really prioritizing the needs of our children. I mean, I think that's the key thing, that parents are putting the needs of their children ahead of the agenda of the culture and of the world's impression on them, that they ought to do what they're being told. And also knowing that the kinds of education and academic results they get at the end of all of this isn't always good. I mean, you put a bunch of peers together. Boy, if you get me talking, you are. This is why you called me. Okay, let me go with this. When it comes to home education, I mean, if you go back to the foundation of how did the public school system even get started, and how did we get this far, and who took it on as their agenda to try to influence it? I mean, private schools were the beginning. It was churches, one-room schoolhouses. I mean, people started schooling, so to speak. It was the norm to be homeschooled. Your mom taught you to read, and you usually learned a trade. And you went and you worked the fields with your dad, and you harvested. And when it was, summertime, when things were just growing and it wasn't quite harvest, that's when school set in. It's totally different than today, right? Now we educate our kids during, at schools during, those harvest times, when it used to be that they were needed out in the field.
Exactly.
So, and churches took that on because they wanted their, patrons, the people who come to church, to learn how to read the Bible for themselves. And they wanted to teach them history, and they wanted to teach them how to make do in the marketplace. And so it was very community-based, not national or, orchestrated like this big postage stamp you're going to put over everyone,
Right.
And so it's just really important. I chose to homeschool because number one, I believed it was a mandate. It was a mandate on my life, with the Lord giving me, saying, these children I gave to you, and you're responsible to raise them up and train them. And so for me, it was easy in that way. Now, I was never going to homeschool. I wasn't going to homeschool. My sister's 10 years younger than me, and my mom decided to homeschool my sister while I was in high school. And I was very offended. I was actually quite hurt by it. I thought, what's wrong with me? Why are you homeschooling? I got public school. Why does she get to stay home? So that's my typical teenage, 15-year-old. And I heard tell that she was thinking about homeschooling me, and I was like, oh no, I had a total attitude about it. And I know that what happened with me and my story is my story. It's the way the Lord, brought me. I was where I needed to be by then. should I have been homeschooled, as my mom and I have talked about it since? Absolutely. I was the kid that was beat up. I was bullied. Talk about being traumatized. My mom would have to put me out the door and close it, or walk me to school and with tears in my eyes going, I don't want to be here, because kids are mean.
Yep.
Kids can be mean. And there was no one there to monitor, and they do their best. Teachers do their best.
Yep.
Principals do their best. But honestly, you put a bunch of peers together and no monitoring whatsoever, or mentoring really, and they're all the same age. You're only going to raise to the lowest standard when you put it together like that.
Right.
The one-room schoolhouses worked so much better because there was always someone to look up to.
Right.
There was always a mentor, someone going before you. Plus, there was more purpose. People were going and they saw where this was headed. There were kids growing up next to them that were moving up and moving on. And it was incredible. And that is what we are creating. As a homeschooler, whether you have one child or many, you can create that for your child and show them that there's purpose behind what they're learning. It's not this institutional. What a perfect name, institutionalized education.
Right.
They're in an institution.
Yes, raising children who ultimately are going to grow up and something like a third of them are going to be institutionalized, or are going to have depression
Exactly.
or are going to have,
Exactly.
and nobody's, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I had Phil Borges on, and his show his film Crazy Wise, which really speaks to the point of we're not even dealing with mental illness the way we should be, because we're so into the instant fix, throwing pills at things. Much more success curing mental illness in the community setting. Much more success. Yeah. And we don't even want to talk about that. And the thing is, when you look at successful styles of schooling, when you look at Montessori, it's not like we don't have examples out there of public school styles that work, or group schooling that works, I should say. We've had phasing. We even had that for a while in the public schools back in the 60s, and we have Montessori where many different ages are together. I used to teach dance and fitness at a Montessori school in Baltimore. I had kids in the class that were 6 to 12. Because that particular school went up to that age, and I think even up to 8th grade, but those kids did something else on the Friday afternoon. But they were all together. They all mentored each other. We talk about that with indigenous cultures where, you've got a kid who's great at pottery, and part of their responsibility becomes showing the little ones and helping in the old days when it was the grandparents teaching. Part of it becomes, so you go work with your little brother and sister that are just learning about the pottery or just learning about the game, and then you get your time with the people that are better than you, who are going to help you, and it becomes this circle of love is what it becomes.
Absolutely.
And a circle of easy, natural education. And we can do it with math. It's total BS that you can't do it with math and science. You have to have somebody standing over there and you have to have testing. That's just nonsense. Years ago, my dad said to me, one of the most important things I think he ever said, when he said to me, the same brain that allows your mother to create a painting is the brain that allows me to create an airplane. It's all creativity. And we are stifling that in the public school system.
Yes, absolutely. And the schools you mentioned earlier, too, it just goes to prove there's freedom, right? You mentioned Montessori. Mm-hmm. You mentioned these other philosophies and ways of educating through experience and through all these other tactics. And honestly, that is what's missing, is the freedom to be able to meet the child's need.
Yes.
And to make them create an environment that is, my philosophy really is to help encourage, and one of my huge passions is to encourage, empower, and equip moms, whether they're homeschooling or not, but to, in motherhood, first of all, and secondarily is kind of a supplement to that, those that choose to homeschool on that front, to help them understand that they have the authority, ththey've got the freedom, praise God really for our continued freedom in this country to still get to homeschool, because that's constantly under attack. And so I really, I have to put that out there. Please don't assume for a second that that's not under attack and not
really
a kind of concern that we all ought to have, is protecting the freedom for parents to make their informed, wise choices for their own children and not to be dictated to at all. And also that we can do this through different methods. There are different methods that work for different children and different families. And you will end up with a much more whole child and a whole adult when they have been given the atmosphere of love and nurture and education and accommodation according to their needs. And it is a huge blessing that we have to get to do that as homeschoolers.
Yes, I didn't realize homeschooling was so under attack, really.
Oh my goodness, yes. It is. I've been homeschooling for over 20 years. Okay, my oldest daughter is 27, and so having homeschooled.
Really, you look great. Your oldest daughter is 27. Sorry, I just have to throw that out there, group, since you can't see her. She does not look like she would have a 27-year-old daughter. But go ahead, or 11 kids. But go ahead. Sorry, I do want to hear about this.
No problem at all. As a matter of fact, I actually have my first 2 grandchildren too. That's what's kind of fun and exciting about me. But. Yeah, having that opportunity and just knowing that I've homeschooled in the early 90s, okay? In the 90s, the atmosphere was so different. I mean, that was a season where you could be called in for truancy at any moment and people could send CPS after you because you chose to homeschool your kids. The environment to train my children, I used to on purpose dress them in uniform because it was socially accepted that they might be at private school, but the fact that I homeschooled was very sketchy. Like in the world, they all just would look at you like, what? You homeschool? Like, isn't that illegal? I mean, the things they used to say would be scary or frightening. And so now the culture's changed quite a bit. As you see, look at the rise, 800,000 in the last 8 years to now 1.8 million. That's incredible. And the reason partly is because of parents taking back their God-given authority to make choices for their children and make wiser choices, wanting a better result for their education. Some of it's reactionary, right, to the kind of environment, let's say, that I grew up with, being bullied, like parents going, there's got to be a better way.
Right.
Here's the deal. We put all of our children in one room with kids all their same ages, with their same level of kind of lack of maturity, let's put it that way, nicely, and expect them to be able to, a 30 classroom set of kids, to have one teacher, maybe an aide, maybe, be able to meet the needs of those 30 children, all at the exact same level and need, to be able to leave there without feeling, well, first of all, to have their brain be clear enough to really, really learn.
Right.
To really be comfortable, not insecure or crying because at lunchtime somebody called them stupid or teased them about their shirt. And you're going, you want this kid to now all of a sudden turn that off and let's put education in the mix. You think education is going to happen in that atmosphere very well? It's not. Kids' little brains get turned off because their brains are thinking about something else.
Exactly.
And now we expect them to learn something.
And you're busy telling them, there's all this anti-bullying stuff. You're busy telling them not to bully while you're bullying them. Because that's what is happening in school. And that is what is happening in the government. Make no mistake about it. When the opt-out of testing movement, we have a big opt-out movement in New York. When the opt-out testing movement started here in New York, the government response to this was to threaten parents. Now, we live in a democracy. We, the people, we pay the taxes that support those schools. But the response from our government in New York and from the federal government, what was this, 2014, I think it was, when opt-out really started to get big. I'm trying to remember. I know it was under the last administration. But the response from the federal government, the response from our local government was, we're going to punish you. You keep your kids out of testing, we're going to withhold your taxes. We're going to make it so that we're going to include the fact that half the kids didn't show up. They got zeros. That means that we get to take over your school. What are you kidding me? If people are not noticing that kind of response, that kind of government response, and saying, vote that guy out, there is something wrong with you. There is seriously something wrong. Because you're either oblivious to what's going on, which is okay. I get oblivious. Like I said, I understand why nobody would watch the news anymore. But you really have to do your research. You really have to know what is going on. And the media, by and large, is not going to cover it. They're not going to, if they're pro one particular person in power, they are not, or one particular person who wants to be in power, they're not going to cover any of this kind of thing. And I've said this before, I think public ed the way it is right now, the National Core Curriculum, the standardized testing, is a conspiracy to keep our children weak and stupid. It is a conspiracy to raise people who cannot think for themselves, who are too afraid to speak for themselves, and who will not go against a powerful government, who will not do it.
That's exactly right. I love that we can agree on so many things, Maddie. It's so good.
Yay!
I totally agree with you. That is exactly right. I'm going to preach. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so, this is why I really encourage every parent, any woman or mom or dad that come to me and kind of ask questions about homeschooling or ask about their choices and their freedoms that they have, is to first of all take authority. Take authority and really make a conscious choice and not always follow the advice of the school system you're trying to get out of at what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, or try to make it look like that. So the first thing I have them do is to sit down and say, hey, listen, you really need to come to a decision, whether you're a single mom or just as a couple with parents coming at homeschooling, and decide, what do you believe about education? They really need you. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people think that it's going to be easy and you just mimic what you did at school. Well, if that's what you wanted, then you just put your kids back in school. But in a homeschooling environment, if it doesn't look, you can either look the same or not. If you're going to sit your kid at a desk and they have to have a pencil in their hand and a piece of paper on the table and their nose to the grindstone for 8 hours during a day, you're just mimicking the school system in your home. How is that set apart, other than the fact that now they're now alone with it and not a bunch of peers bugging them? Sure, that's one method. But really, think about, what is your philosophy of education? What kind of an environment do you want to create for your child? Who do you want them to be when they graduate? Start with the end in mind. I really try to encourage parents to think forward. Who is your child as an adult, and work backwards? What can you do to help build that child to be who you envision them to be, with the freedoms and the intellect and the wisdom to approach life? And then create your curriculum around that. What are their gifts? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? I tell my kids, they have left hand and right hand jobs. If a child is very good at math, for instance, that I'm teaching, but they really struggle in English, then I make sure that, yes, they're constantly challenged in math, which is already a gift, but that they always have to learn their difficult job. I call it their left hand if they're a righty, right? That their left hand task needs to take a little bit more time to really, hone and strengthen. And so you can be patient with that. And by the way, kids are not always at the same level all the time, even in themselves. If you have a third grader and they are reading at a first grade level, they may be in the fifth grade math book.
Right.
So please understand, that every child has the capacity as their brain matures in different areas at different times. And they need to have the freedom to be able to be where they are, have a parent who loves them and is attentive to their specific level in every subject, and introduce it in a way that is gentle and beautiful. There's some amazing influencers when it comes to education. Charlotte Mason, for instance, is one of my absolute favorite resources. Is learning about Charlotte Mason. She was the turn of the century, and she had made huge strides in the English, in the reformation of how they taught and treated children. She lived during the time when kids were to be seen and not heard. They were working in factories, and they were not being given the opportunity to rise above their station. Right. She really was at the forefront of helping transform that and say, what? Children have the capacity to learn anything and everything, and we shouldn't be limiting them in what they're allowed to learn just because we don't think they should be, they should need to be a cobbler and never learn how to do the books.
Exactly.
And they should all be able to do everything. So really the heart and attitude is to create a buffet of education for your children where they can eat from it, and they need to try every dish on the table. And then they might devour the entire plate of one subject because they're in love with it, and let them. But they also have them try those others so that they're not too picky eaters. They just can try everything.
Well, I love that analogy. That's absolutely brilliant. And we did that. When I graduated high school in 1971, and I was in the choir of our school, and our choir did an exchange program with a school in Melbourne, Florida. And we were an upper middle income school going down to a school that was very middle to lower middle income school at the time. And they had phasing. which is basically they were one of the schools, the public schools chosen because they were lower income to experiment with the phasing program, which is basically what you're talking about. You got a first grader who's reading at a third grade level, then that's what they read. But they can't do math. They're still doing math at a kindergarten level, or not that back then nobody did math in kindergarten, but you get the picture. So you know what I mean.
Get it.
So and it was so successful. And then we went back to politics. And then it went back to, wait a minute, we don't have any statistics. We don't have any test scores. We can't say, this country's doing better than us, because they have test scores that say they're doing better than us, and we made it, rather than stay on the track of innovative education for all, we went to the track of one size fits all education. And which is ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. Scientifically, it makes zero sense. Everything we know about the brain now, zero sense. The only reason we could possibly be sticking with this is for somebody's line in somebody's pockets and to brainwash our children.
Absolutely. And,
That's my
I was gonna say,
observation.
what this reminds me of is, well, having 11 children, I've got a lot of experience with this, but the insecurity that a mother feels when she's breastfeeding her child. Does she get to see that bottle empty? Does she get to know how many ounces her child was fed? Or does she respond to the needs of her child, and she feeds them when they're hungry, and she lets them sleep when they sleep, and she takes it on faith, right? And also on the knowledge of seeing the results. Is the child growing? Is the child alert? Are they attentive? There are other ways to assess a child other than standardized testing. They don't need to always have to. This is basically the bottle-fed baby for education.
Right.
Let's just scrap the breast and go straight to the bottle only ever, and never trust the fact that a breastfed mother can absolutely feed her child and give them the best nutrients possible. It's the same for education.
Yes.
And the results are not going to be pen and paper test results, because guess what? The school down the street decided to do field trips and focus on, this social studies topic for this month. And next month, the one down the street over here decided to read out about a book about something else. So you're not going to give a standardized test to the kids who went on the field trip and learned about, marine biology, and have the other kids who are really focusing this month on, the slave trade, and have them have the same scores because they can't ask the right questions.
Exactly.
The questions have to be based on what they were taught, not based on what they were expected to know.
Exactly.
And you know what? If you teach your child that you're never finished learning, that life is a journey, and that learning and education is a gift that it never stops giving, then you have a joyful, equipped people who will always continue to better themselves.
Yes. And I cannot say this enough, because we teach in private schools also. Private schools have none of this. Private schools are basically project-based learning. There's a lot of attention to individual kids. So the schools where the people in our government send their kids look nothing like the public schools where we're sending our kids.
Well, you wonder why they don't understand where we're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's the truth. And I'll just so you know, like you were asking about the attack on homeschooling, like California, as far as technically, I don't homeschool my children. It's funny. I'm called a homeschooler because I'm at home and I'm educating my children. But legally, I am a private educating parent. I have a private school, and I am protected under all private school and private education laws in California. Praise God.
Yeah,
because
really.
That means every law that governs private schools governs me. And I get to live under the compliance of those rules, and that's fine, and I'm given freedom. But the word homeschooling is being hijacked by the public school system. And they have stolen the term homeschooling and begin to bring it under the public sector through their funding. And they are funding their homeschool movements and wooing parents into the public system to still get their funding. And they're calling it homeschooling. It's the first time the word homeschooling has ever entered into any legislation, and it's through the public school system. So if you call yourself a public school and you are homeschooling through, let's say, a charter, for instance,
right,
you are still public schooling your child. You've taken their curriculum. You've agreed to all their rules to separate church and state completely, separate any godly. If you want to have any kind of religious bent, you are not allowed to, even though you're home in your own little house. You've agreed to use their agreed upon curriculum. Just understand what you're agreeing to when you say, if you take federal fund money or even state money, there are always strings attached. Don't ever take that for granted or assume it's not. There are strings attached. And so the bottom line is homeschoolers are those that you mentioned. I'm curious to know, let's say, how many are actually private educating as opposed to publicly educating at home?
I don't know. I didn't see the breakdown. I just saw that one statistic. But I'm just thrilled that you brought all this up, because this just adds fuel to my fire about the government attempt to take over everything.
Right?
And we cannot let them do this to children. We
No,
cannot.
This is the
We
turn of
cannot.
the screw. It's the turn of the screw. And the thing is, people, as it is for everything, we're one generation away from chaos. We're one generation away from losing our freedom. And we are one, election away from losing our freedoms in so many, times. So we do need to be very careful. We need to equip each other and encourage each other to be alert and read and learn and take ownership of our freedom, because it's the new battle. We don't have our muskets,
Right.
We don't have that. And honestly, we need to have our ability to know and educate ourselves so that we know, what are we giving away for the ease of money?
Exactly.
And
let me
it's basically, extortion. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to remind people, so we haven't done a show on education in a while, but I would just like to remind people that the lobby, and one of the things I would love to fight for were I ever elected would be to end lobbying, but the lobby for keeping standardized testing and one-size-fits-all education, real estate, and the people who own the testing companies and print the textbooks. Those are your biggest lobbies.
Oh my gosh.
So these are the people who are directly benefiting from this, are allowed to determine who our children are educated by and how our children are educated. And they are giving millions, probably at this point, billions of dollars across this nation to keep that going. Real estate, because I don't know, does California fund education through real estate? Through real estate taxes?
I don't know.
New York
I don't know,
does.
actually.
New York definitely does. And that is something we should all be agreeing on needs to be done away with. There is no way you are going to raise the level of children in poor communities, raise the level of their education, if you're going to fund education based on real estate tax. That is not going to happen.
Uh-huh.
So what you're always going to have this excuse that's used that, well, but if we don't make it so that it's standardized, if we don't, how are we going to know if these kids are getting educated? They're not. No. So we're going to go, okay, so nobody's kids really get an education. Nobody's kids get to enjoy learning because we have to keep testing. It's like we've gone insane. I honestly think that sometimes.
And that's why it's difficult. It's hard to find the best solution to, honestly, because for some reasons, because I've heard a lot of people go, oh, well, go to the voucher system or go to these other systems. And honestly, I remember the first time that the voucher system came through on all of our ballots as an option. Boy, I might get flack for this, but I'll explain why. I voted no, absolutely, because the voucher system, it's money from the government, and it will always come with strings attached.
Yep.
And if the private school that I want to go to, really, to walk in their own integrity, they're going to say, I refuse to accept vouchers because then the government will tell me what I can and can't teach.
Right.
Why do you think that they wanted to create the voucher system?
Right.
I mean, that's why. And people, I think, don't realize that. They go, oh, yay, I'm going to have lots of freedom. Well, no, you won't, because the place you want to send your kid is still not going to take it. Because if they have the values that you want to teach in your kids, they're not going to take it. So to maintain their integrity.
Exactly.
So it's not a win.
No, it's not a win. And that is what people really, really need to look at, is how much control are you giving to the government? You know, that you really have to ask yourself that every step of the way. And sadly, I was talking to friends, we were talking about something that's now being called the bigotry of low expectations. So when you look in a lot of these communities that are people of color, that are poor, the education level is so way below. And I'm not talking about, we're talking about there's certainly mega individual problems that go on in those communities, but the type of education they're getting is nothing close to what's going on just in regular public school, and they're in private school where children are expected to excel, or in homeschooling where people are expected to do their best. These kids are not expected to do anything at all. And the parents have been brainwashed into thinking that, well, education is all about how much money you're going to spend, so that, if we complain, if we don't sit for the test, if we don't do this, if we don't do that, then we're not going to get our money. And education has zero to do with money. Our program is a hands-on program. There's not a book cracked during our program. And one of the reasons our program became popular is because there used to be a 5th grade test in New York. I mean, I'm certainly glad the test is gone now, but they used to have, we teach 4th graders. There used to be a 5th grade test, and the 5th grade social studies test was all about American Indians. And all of these schools that had us noticed that everybody's scores went up. And as soon as I heard, including special needs kids, which is unheard of on a standardized test. And as soon as I heard this, I thought, so how come nobody is saying, do you think maybe we need to do a little more hands-on education in everything? And I will say it again, when you go to private school, whether it's Montessori or Waldorf or very traditional sort of conservative style private school, there is not a standardized curriculum. Kids are doing projects, especially in the lower grades.
Yeah, and we're learning. See, and that's one of the other differences too. Is like I teach more of a classical method to my children, so we really adopt the methodology of like grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, and teaching our children to load grammar and memorize things at young ages, and then to repeat. Repetition is so key, so that they can really get things seated deeply into their brains. But one of the other huge things I've done from the beginning, before I really even stumbled upon like learning more about classical, is Socratic, the Socratic method of asking good questions. And the other key about testing and why it doesn't work is I teach my children, and I encourage all the homeschoolers to do this, we teach for mastery. That's the reason is when you're one-on-one with a child, you don't respond when they don't get it. You don't just skip them forward. You teach toward mastery. Right. And when they learn toward mastery, then they truly have the skill. And so I'll take however long it takes for them to master it. And that's where patience comes in, and just consistency, patience and consistency. And kids learn, and they just want to learn. They're sponges.
Yes, we're built that way. We're built to learn. That's right. We're built to be kind. We're built to be grateful. We're built to be in community. We are. Phil Borges talked about this in his research with cultures all over the world. We are built to be in community. And I direct a community of homeschoolers too in our city, and it is phenomenal. And the kids are all different ages, and they're able to get together, and we do science projects. We do an art project together. They learn some of this grammar we're talking about. It's phenomenal, and the results. I'm telling you, when I switched over and started doing this particular curriculum with my kids, I had already graduated 5 children, and I'm now I'm still raising and graduating my last 6. And so we're using this, and it's incredible the difference of night and day almost to what the younger ones are understanding because of the community method with which we share this material, with the memory work and songs and things like that. Just make it fun for them, and they learn even better. Exactly. That's what I always tell the kids. You know what's great about fun? It's fun. And it helps you remember stuff. I want to thank Celia for joining us, who added in, you need to recognize the gifts of each child, and also that, parents at home lead by example. Set the example.
Yes.
You are there. You are the first line.
You're the lead learner.
Yep. So, Maggie, thank you. When you get your new business venture underway, I hope you come back on. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you to my wonderful producer, Bobby Lacera, and everybody here at Strong Island Entertainment. And to all of you listeners, peace, love, and freedom. Thank you.